This is the Go Radio Business Show.
Morning, Thomas.
Good morning, Willie. How are you?
Well, I'm good, but that was the week that was. Big Labour conference, loads of big announcements, so loads for us to talk about today.
Yes, indeed. Now, one of the things coming out of your Labour Party conference was Keir Starmer announcing 200 million for Grangemouth. Now, normally, I'm not keen on government knowing better than business where to allocate their capital. But on this occasion, Keir Starmer has said, look, we'll put in 200, but for that, we're looking for private business to top it up with a multiple of 3. So he's looking for 600. Now, obviously, he doesn't have MD at the present time, or he would have announced it at the conference. But I still think it's a more intelligent way of government allocating money behind business. What did you think, Willie? Because you were at the conference.
Right, well, first I thought the announcement was superb, right? But when the dust settled and I tried to get my head around what he meant, I'm really, really confused, right? Because INEOS are not leaving, right? So it's not as if it's an empty site, here's what we can do. So they still want to continue by, I think they're going to use it for jet fuel, cleaning up jet fuel or something. So they still plan to operate Grangemouth. So it looks for me as if the 200 million and the 25 million that the Scottish Government have said that they would put in looks like it's to deal with the people who are going to lose their jobs. Right, and that's the 300 out of the 400 who I think are going to be jobless once INEOS are finished. So I don't understand what Keir meant about attracting private finance.
Right.
I don't understand. It can't be running about
Grangemouth does multiple things, and the joint venture between INEOS, which is Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and PetroChina, that's the bit that they're going to close down. They're saying they can't make any money. There's about 400 to 500 job losses, and that's going to happen. But what I believe Keir Starmer's saying is if any private capital wants to use that part of Grangemouth, there's 200 million from the British government, but it needs to be led by private company. And as I say, he obviously doesn't have anybody, or he would have announced it on the day.
Right, so I didn't know that. So there's going to be a huge sway of the land going to be available for new businesses and people maybe to invest. Well, that's good. So, and it's always good as well. I love it when we talk about leverage, right? So, and I know you do. So if there's 225 million altogether of public money going in, hopefully that there'll be a few budding Scottish entrepreneurs will have good ideas for what they can do at Grangemouth.
Well, let's see it and hope. Now, the next thing that got a mention in Anis Sarwar, who's hoping to be the next First Minister of Scotland, he brought up the the point about Quangos, and this was also brought up by Russell Findlay, who's the Conservative leader. So I can't give it all to Anis. And this was a note that came out from David Hamilton, who's the Information Commissioner of Scotland, along with Stephen Boyle, who's the Auditor General. I know Stephen, and he's a very good man. He knows his stuff. And he was saying that him and David Hamilton have been playing public authority bingo with all these Quangos. He thought there was 130, but he wasn't sure. Now, Willie, this really gets my blood boiling. So instead of getting rid of these useless bodies, local authorities are just go straight to putting the council taxes up, and Scottish Government goes straight to putting income tax up. If this was a business, we would look at our costs first of all to see what we could do. So you argued with me last week about Dodge in Scotland. Do you like it better this week? Now your august leader is for it.
I didn't argue with you about Dodge in Scotland. I just argued that you were trying to make it was a new idea from James
I was
Watt.
not trying to make it was a new idea. Of course it wasn't. It's obviously Elon Musk's idea.
Exactly.
But
I would say it's
now
a good idea.
Anis is Sarwar's idea
Yeah.
or Russell Findlay's idea.
Yeah.
Tell me, do you like it?
Well, I would just say to you that I think obviously it proves that Anis Sarwar listens to the show. Right, and he heard you the week before, right? So no doubt that hopefully you might be getting a call. But for I seen a guy in the Herald today having a right go at that and saying that this was a champagne moment for the SNP. I'd love to see him explaining that one, how that could be a champagne moment for the SNP.
Right. How could it be a champagne moment, Willie?
Neil Mackay in the Herald today says that this could be a, Anis Sarwar's utterings on Dodge. It could be a champagne moment for SNP, so I don't know what that meant, but I would love to get behind it. But what I would say to you is I think it's a great idea. But it's interesting, right, that I was there and it was brilliant. I thought his speech and the content was magic, just what the country needs. But I would say to you that at the same time, we're talking about maybe going back to regional enterprise zones, so that'll be more than less.
Yeah, but there does seem to be this, we'll centralise it, we'll regionalise it, we'll centralise it. I mean, come on, just get on with it. You've got Jim McDonald now coming in at Scottish Enterprise. Jim knows what he's doing. I bumped into him at Glasgow Airport the other week and he was on his travels yet again. He's certainly a hard worker, Jim. But, Willie, this really gets to the nub. And I think this has been a good thing from Donald Trump and my pal Elon Musk. They have put it out there to governments around the world and especially Scotland. Come on, guys, get your cost base under control before you start raising your taxes on the poor Scottish taxpayer again. Come on.
Yeah, I totally agree, Tom. Some of the tax rises this week have been totally unacceptable, especially because we think we're getting less for having to pay more. It was interesting. Yes. I watched an article this week about that the Glasgow and the state of Glasgow, and I watched the leader of the council going round the city, and basically she was saying that the narrative is not as bad as people are making out. And then you pick up the papers today and they've had to agree to give the cleansing department millions and millions of pounds more to clear up the rats. But things are okay, So I think that this is something, if we felt as if we were getting value for money, we don't mind what the rates are. But at the moment, we are absolutely not getting value for money. So it's a 10% rise.
Can I just talk about quickly one of my other heroes, my real hero, Warren Buffett? Warren's now 94 years old and he does a letter to his shareholders, of which I'm a very small one, every year. And when Jamie joined our business, I said to him, he's got to read every shareholder's letter from 1965 because this is better than going to any business school. And this letter that came out just about a couple of days ago, I felt a wee bit sad because when Jamie and I talked about it, we both felt maybe it was his last letter. He talks a lot about Charlie Munger, who's his longtime partner, who's just passed away, and some of the nuggets from this year's letter. He talked about people decisions, Willie, and he talked about most business leaders delay taking tough decisions on people. And Warren said this was what Charlie called sucking your thumb. He said problems can't be wished away. They require action, however uncomfortable they are. And I mean, here's just some of the stats, Willie. He had operating earnings of $47.4 billion. And he paid tax to the American government of $26.8 billion. And this is the highest that any company's ever paid the US government. And indeed, it's 5% of all of the tax that's been paid. And it's incredible. And since 1965 to 2024, he has compounded And for the mathematicians within you, you'll know this is amazing. He is compounded at 19.9%. A true hero of mine. And for any businessman, woman out there, you've got to read these letters. They are brilliant.
Yep, what a man. Can I go back to the conference for a moment? One of the
Yeah, of
things I
course.
was happy to hear Anna Sarwar say is that, you know, housing will be a key pillar of where they're trying to rebuild the country. And it was
Good.
interesting that he did mention that, you know, that SNIB should be at the heart of that, which I think is great news, I think, for Willie Watt and the team there, which is great. But on that, Tom, I read this morning that local authorities have paid £734 million last year to help with temporary accommodation and homeless issues. This
Oh
is
my
totally
goodness.
unacceptable.
So Willie, how are you getting on? Because I know you've met with Kate Forbes, you've met with the housing minister, you've met with everybody. I mean, you're tireless on this. Are you getting anywhere?
Well, we left the meeting last week where I believe that Sean Neal, the housing consultant, has, head of housing for the government advisor, was going to get in touch to come and see the project. So I'm hoping that will happen. That will be arranged this week for a date very soon. And then we're going to, but it was a very positive meeting. So hopefully that we'll get the first project. It was interesting reading yesterday about Octopus and their first project where they've got involved with a company down south to do something similar. So it'd be good if in Scotland we can get the project going to see, you know, how we can get on with that and obviously bring much better value to people who are renting properties.
So, Willie, you were at the Labour Party Scottish Conference on Business. Do you think, I know you're a Labour man for 51 years, so, but do you think that the words will turn into action if people vote for them? Because frankly, I think you and I were both disappointed. We gave Labour a chance in Westminster, and then, quite frankly, they kicked business in the teeth with their NI, and, you know, businesses are really struggling. So, what do you think is the difference with Scottish Labour then?
Well, all I would say to Anis, and to give him credit, what he did was, because you're right, a lot of people are not happy, that he managed to get Jonathan Reynolds to come up. And I can tell you, in fair play to Jonathan, that he gave up all day to have half-hour meetings with loads and loads of business guys, myself included, Andrew Malcolm, Ian Anderson and Douglas from Gap. So from all political sides in the spectrum. And he gave everyone an ear. I think we were in for half an hour and we let it be known. We were talking about the inheritance tax, how unfair it was. And I think I have to applaud both Anis and Jonathan Reynolds for taking the time to come and listen. Hopefully, for me, something will come out of that, but the proof will be in the pudding.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, as we always say in this show, I mean, I don't mind what colour the politics is, as long as it's positive for Scotland.
Yeah.
We're hearing about 130 Quangos in business, Willie.
Yeah.
You and I talk about it a lot. There's this admin creep, and you wake up one day and you went, hang on a minute, what does that person do? What are they doing? And you need to be so on it in business every year just to go, right, hang on, what does that person do? Are they adding to the bottom line? And frankly, governments are not good at it. And it does need a dodgy dodger. And I think it should be you that gets stuck in and sorts it all out.
I would say to you that also from the comments, I was at the business forum and I was at the table where a round table discussing about housing, and it's amazing just the point that you make that even when you fix out the finance, even when you fix out the land, it's the regulations that are holding things up. So we have to look at first the specification and what we're looking for, you know, for sustainable housing going forward, but also how we can cut through loads of the red tape and the regulation. So hopefully, again, on this one, watch this space.
Watch this space. Well, listen, we live in hope, Willie, that's for sure. So what else has been on your mind this
Well,
week?
there's as I say, in the next few weeks we'll get Stuart on the programme. We'll come on a bit later, but we're going to pick one week and just talk about Singapore, hopefully once you've been. But
Yep.
I think some good news. You see that there was a great investment headlines this week when Waferfab secured 12 million in equity investment from an Indian business to expand its semiconductor production facility here in Scotland. Right, and
Well done.
there was
Well
another
done.
3.4 million raised by a Scottish biotech business. Let me see how you pronounce this. Fraction 8. Right. So
Right.
so some money is pouring into Scotland. But on that, it's interesting, Tom. Did you see that Mr. Trump's way of trying to work in America is already kicking in with Apple announcing today that they're going to have most of their investments in the US? So they're going to invest 500 billion all in the US, creating 20,000 new jobs. That's a lot of money just for 20,000 new jobs.
It is, Willie. I mean, it's just listen, there's a lot of things we can criticize Donald Trump for, and we should when he gets it wrong. But he really does. He's putting America first in all this, and like any businessman, he's very transactional. He's even saying to the Ukraine, "Hang on a minute, we gave you X amount, so we want the right to your minerals." I mean, I don't think there's another politician on the planet would have come up with that, Willie. But anyway, whether that's right or wrong, I'm not sure. But he is going for it, and American business has certainly got his ear, and he certainly has their back.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that we cannot go by this week without talking about politics and its involvement and its, the effect it will have in business. And I think that the German elections this week are going to have ramifications all across Europe, and a big wake-up call, obviously, with a surge of the right, doubling their vote from 10 to 20%. But the
Right.
interesting...
So what's happened here, Willie? Because I have missed this. I
Right.
must admit.
So in Germany, the far right came second in the elections. But the real interesting thing that's broke this week, which is I'm astounded at, 40% of the people in East Berlin voted for them. Right. So it's
Right.
interesting.
Okay.
So a wee bit like Donald Trump threatened back in the day about secession back again in the States if he didn't win. I think there's going to be major questions asked in Germany now, because there's no doubt the unification of Germany put Germany back a long way. The cost what it cost them. I just wonder now if politics will get in the way as to what they might be questions asked about the east and west of Germany breaking up again. I think
Wow.
I think that
Fascinating, Willie.
right.
Fascinating.
But
I need to catch up with that.
Yeah, but most fascinating is, Tom, and I'd like to ask you this. I think the ramifications for what Donald Trump is saying, from the way that politics is moving in Europe and in the UK, if Donald Trump gets his way and they become very narrow-minded and blinkered about investment, I think there could be a whole reset of the financial markets across the world.
Wow. Well, listen, I think he is disrupting politics as we know it. I don't always think that's a bad thing, because this, I mean, look at the state of Scotland now. Our public sector is so bloated. Um, the government has not had the back of business, in my opinion, over the past 10 years. So we need change. I would like to see positive change. And if Donald Trump is a catalyst for that, then it's threat or opportunity. I'm always going to look for the opportunity. So I've got to see it as a good thing for Scotland, Willie.
Well, President Macron had to point out to Mr. Trump yesterday at their meeting in the White House that France is the 5th largest investor in the US.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that came as a surprise to him. So
Probably didn't know that, Willie.
well, it'll be interesting to see how that tit for tat works. But let's finish this segment this week on another positive. It's great to see that Allah, right, the dairy company based down in Lockerbie, the largest dairy cooperative in the country, has announced a 90 million investment in its plant there, designed for the future-proof it. The site will become a centre of excellence for UHT milk and lactose-free milk production and protect jobs in this area for a long time to come. Great investment. Well done to Allah.
Well, I want to applaud Arla for that 90 million investment. That's no pocket change. And down in Lockerbie, down in the border there. So I think, well done, Arla. Somebody believes in Scotland. Let's get behind it.
And I love their new slogan, "We are the people."
The Go Radio Business Show with Hunter and Haughey. Hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and never miss an episode.
So we're all pals back. Stuart Patrick, welcome back, Stuart.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello, Stuart. I'm looking for some positive vibes from your dulcet tone.
We're going to have a go, Tom. We're going to have a go.
It's a wee while since you've been on it.
I know. It seems as if winter has been keeping me in my house all the
Right.
time.
So we'll give you an hour and a half a day then for a catch-up,
Well,
okay?
there's a few things to cover, so let's see what we can
Fire
do.
ahead.
Okay, well, the announcement of that £200 million from the UK Government's National Wealth Fund for Grangemouth has also sparked interest in Glasgow in the role that the Wealth Fund could play next. In the Chancellor's January growth speech, Glasgow was lined up as one of 4 cities which could work with the Wealth Fund to develop strategic partnerships. And those partnerships would look at the investments needed to close the productivity gap between our major regional cities like Manchester and Birmingham and Leeds and the national UK average. The prize is said to be worth £33 billion. And the prize is even bigger if UK cities could match the productivity of similar cities across Europe. Cities are usually more productive than their home country average, so the UK is unusual in having so many cities that fall below national levels. It's over 10 years since Glasgow signed its £1 billion plus city deal with the UK and Scottish governments, and with the UK government publishing its plans for more devolution to English city regions, now would be a good time to agree what comes next for Glasgow. New comprehensive deals are promised for the likes of Manchester and Birmingham. Transport, skills, innovation, housing and energy all going to be tackled. So there are plenty of options for doing the same in Glasgow, and the Chamber's been arguing for projects like the Scottish Events Campus, the Clyde Metro light rail link to the airport at Glasgow, the region's 3 innovation districts led by the Universities of Glasgow and Strathclyde. These are all examples of projects that could be supported quickly with a devolution deal for the city region. It could also build on the progress that we've made with growing sectors like the financial services, space comms, renewables, and now defence. At the beginning of this year, I was glad to be involved in the panel agreeing how an extra £10 million awarded by the Chancellor to innovation projects, how that should be spent. And we'll soon learn also how the £160 million investment zone for Glasgow is going to be used to grow advanced manufacturing. There was no shortage of projects submitted, and every time a programme like this is awarded to the city, it stimulates at least an equal amount of private sector investment. A new devolution deal for Glasgow would also help build momentum in the lead up to the 2026 Commonwealth Games, and we had the opportunity last week to make that case to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury as he continues his management of the Comprehensive Spending Review. Another positive sign was the recent publication of a study by American Research Institute, the RAND Corporation, into the skills needs of the Clyde's maritime industry, with companies like BAE Systems, Babcock and the Malin Group all expressing a clear and growing need for talent. The signals are that the Scottish Government is planning to respond with support to help achieve the industry's aims. There were also several maritime projects coming through the investment zone process, enough to reinforce the Chamber's view that the Clyde would benefit from a national maritime investment programme, especially now that defence spending looks set to increase. Glasgow's taken a fair amount of stick lately, but there's plenty of reason to be optimistic. We hear some suggestion that the Scottish Government will bring forward amendments to the housing bill that may help release hundreds of millions of pounds of investment in rental housing, something that could make a substantial difference to the city centre. And the Council has also agreed a new budget, as we know, with an additional at least 20 million for cleansing and road repairs. It's also made some positive moves to get some empty heritage buildings back into use, possible CPO at the Egyptian Halls in Union Street and the former Lighthouse building in Mitchell Street as a centre for SMEs in the renewables sector. The Chamber's also begun our 2025 International Trade Programme. This month we signed an agreement with Bremen Invest to double down on our trade visits to northwestern Germany. Our German colleagues took a keen interest in the National Manufacturing Institute for Scotland and the Smart Things Accelerator project in Sky Park. In April, we're going to take a trade delegation out to Tartan Week in New York. And in June, as a consequence of previous chamber visits, Glasgow was invited to be the guest city at the 10th China International Technology Fair in Shanghai. We're going to use that to raise the profile of Glasgow and Scottish companies with the full support of the Shanghai Municipal Authority. And that's the kind of opportunity that could make a real difference to companies looking to grow in Asian markets. And then finally, we'll be in Singapore in September with an intent to take another delegation out, both to Singapore and to Thailand.
Well, we've been talking about Singapore, and thanks for that. We've been talking about Singapore now for a couple of weeks, and obviously I've just returned from there. And I think I'd told you this in the past about the famous statue down at the waterfront where the gentleman who's from the Chamber of Commerce in Glasgow being the arbiter between two mandarins battering about the price for goods. So obviously I've had a business in Singapore for many years, but it's only recently that I've learned the history of Singapore and the turnaround there. And I think that the Chamber should spend a lot of time there to try to work out what they have done. I mean, to bring your GDP per head of capita up from $1,200 a head to $86,000 is absolutely incredible, and we could learn from that. So I'm absolutely delighted.
We're obviously keen on Singapore because it's got a lot of Scottish companies already using it. People like Edrington are based out there for their Asia exports, because Singapore's an easy place. It's expensive, but it's an easy place to set up a business in order to serve the whole of the rest of Southeast Asia.
Obviously, Jardine Matheson being one of the largest companies in Asia, heavy across Singapore as well. So, Tom, you should maybe jump onto that visit. You know, you're heading to go there, so go with the Chamber.
Well, I would love to come in that. So, Positive Patrick, if you can send me details of that, I would be delighted if I can join your trade mission to Singapore.
We would be delighted to have you. And Willie's right, it was a Scot. It wasn't just Stamford Raffles, it was William Farquhar, who was a Scot, who actually did all the work.
He built the place.
Yeah, he did the work.
Yeah, but I think, Stuart, you made a point there which I think is very valid. We should be on the front foot here. There's a huge opportunity with what's going to be happening here with the increase in defence spend. The Clyde could be booming once again. All the companies you mentioned, BAE Systems, Siemens, Thales, all the companies there on the Clyde, Malin, there's a huge opportunity for them. You know what I mean? And not only that as well, there may be actually a potential for doing work for other countries in Europe, because of the capability they have there.
And I think, one of the issues that the defence industry's always had on the Clyde was how insecure the contracting was. You weren't sure how long you were going to be doing contracts. You can see what's happened, that BAE Systems now have a long-term contract for the development of the Type 26s, because that has led them to the investment of that huge shipbuilding hall that's not far off opening, I think. And if the same could be applied to the other sector, the other companies in the sector, then there's a huge potential growth in employment.
Yeah, what it means for the young people of Govan and surrounding areas in relation to apprenticeships and new opportunities is amazing. You know, we should maybe look at maybe a big part of the 200 million spend, maybe how we can find opportunities for the 300 people who are maybe losing their jobs at Grangemouth to relocate to Govan.
Well, indeed. You know, and again...
Great idea.
Yeah.
Tom, do you think that, we've heard all this good news about Glasgow, we've heard about the Commonwealth Games, right? But I know how that you are all about, fiscal prudence. I was amazed to read this week, Stuart, that Glasgow's got £1.6 billion of debt.
Well, indeed, Yep. And you can certainly look back and say that one of the major issues with that was the equal pay settlement. That was a massive, I think that was about 800 million that had to be settled. And it's not for us in the Chamber to debate really whether that was a sensible investment or not. Clearly, that was a political view that it needed to be done. But it obviously limits the ability of the council going forward to invest in some of the asset base that we need to help grow the economy.
And that was a double whammy, because not only is a debt, we had to pawn all our silver to raise that 500, 600 million. Some of our iconic buildings are down as collateral, and I think that there may have been a better way of doing it. But this is, for me, the interest in that alone will be more than the shortfall. each year. So, you know, it'd be interesting to put a wee task force together to try, not a Quango, to try and find
Not a
ways
Quango, Willie,
about how
no.
we could have a long-term approach to reducing the debt. That would help greatly.
And I guess one of the questions will be the extent to which we can still use some of the land assets that there are in the city for, and as you've argued convincingly for several years now in housing development, is there scope to realise some of the value that still sits in the land holdings?
Yeah, so Stuart, Willie has put forward a good argument, but nobody's listening. Nobody's taking action. We're not getting houses built. What do we need to do?
Wow, good question. Let's be honest. We're back into a position now, though, where both governments are talking about economic growth, and that wasn't something that we've been accustomed to. We've had a challenge in the last couple of years, having to deal with
10 years. 10 years.
Yeah, you're right. Having to deal with a language that was fairly hostile towards economic growth. We're much more optimistic that the people are listening to us now at the political levels, that we can put forward proposals. So actually, as I was saying earlier, the consequence of putting forward some proposals for the maritime industry on the Clyde to try and handle skills, I'm not sure we would have got very far with that under previous administrations. I think we are beginning to, well, it certainly looks like we're making progress with this one.
Yeah, but as you say, Glasgow getting a mention by the government in relation to, let's try and go for the new city deal too, which I believe there's a lot of talk going on about now. I know that there's people within Glasgow talking about it. I was speaking to Donald last week, and they're trying to put a case forward for that, which is great. So if the government down south say that Glasgow's on the list, if we're talking about the wealth fund, then let's see how we can get in and get some of that money to enhance Glasgow even more.
And I think actually something like Clyde Metro, which could enhance the value of land and the routes alongside the routes which it goes through. Land value capture is something that's very well known along transport projects. So there's scope to get a bit of a positive engine going if we just get can we speed up the processes to get something like Clyde Metro?
Yeah, it's interesting that we're talking about maybe CPO in the Egyptian building in Union Street. According to when the SEPA report for derelict and void land, Glasgow's get 3,750 hectares of land before they get to Greenbelt that they can build on. Come on. Yeah. Something should have been done about Egyptian buildings 20 years ago. In fact, the Egyptian building now through water ingress, probably it's that bad in the inside that probably have to be knocked down. You'd be lucky to keep the facade.
Oh, we would argue that one of the things we're arguing for with the UK government is potentially quite targeted tax allowance for heritage buildings to be reused if they are derelict. Yeah. Doesn't need to be a hugely expensive treasury investment, but it could make a difference to buildings like the Egyptian halls.
Yeah, definitely. Stuart, it's great to have you back. You know, you've got us buzzing again as usual, you know, so we can't make it as long again before you're back on the show. So maybe in another few weeks that we can get you on, but we're definitely going to get you on when you come back from Singapore.
Oh, no problem at all. Delighted and look forward to taking Tom out to meet them all.
The Go Radio Business Show with Hunter and Haughey. Hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and never miss an episode.
So we've got a great guest this week. We've got Colin Rowley, who's the Executive Chair of Dron and Dickson. Welcome.
Thanks, Willie. Thanks, Tom.
Hello, Colin. How are you?
I'm good, my friend. I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm really looking forward to hearing this story. It's quite a story. So, where did it all begin for you?
Where did it all begin? Well, I think it's before I maybe talk about myself, I should maybe tell you a little bit about the company. Yeah. I tend to lead with purpose. Our purpose as a company is to get everyone home safe. There is a little bit of background with me. I grew up in Grangemouth, so the company has historically provided competency and assurance on electrical systems and equipment in hazardous areas. Anywhere where there's sparks that could cause an ignition of vapours, dust, gas, anywhere you need the integrity of that equipment to be absolutely reliable. So it tends to be fairly nasty areas, things like oil platforms, drilling rigs, petrochemical plants, some of the nicer places like distilleries, in fact, and the pharmaceutical industry, places where there's gases, dust or vapours, as I say. So the company actually originated in Glasgow back in 1927, at St Vincent Street. In those days, it was working in the traditional industries, the shipbuilding, the coal mining, and the likes, a bit of MOD work as well.
And is your family involved away back then?
No, as the name suggests, John Dickson, it sounds like a start of a bad joke. There was an Englishman, a Welshman, and a Scotsman. And in those days, they were working, supplying equipment into the coal mines, which back in the day were all independent. This is before the National Coal Board. So it's got its roots in supplying equipment and indeed detonating. We used to blow things up. Now ironically, we stopped things from blowing up. So back then, the Dron family, it went through 3 iterations of family ownership, and then eventually in the early...
Yes, this. Were they part of the idea of taking canaries down the mines to save them
No,
too
no,
much
not
of gas
quite.
build-up?
Not quite. No, they were in those days, they were supplying all sorts of shot blast equipment. So things like explosives for the big dock up at Kishon. Dron and Dickson was involved supplying explosives up there years and years ago. Anyway, that side of the business got sold off. The Drons had made their money, and my dad joined the company in the mid to early 80s. And he started to transition because of his background in oil and gas. He started to push more into Aberdeen and the market that was available up there. We weren't really playing in that market at that time. I wasn't involved in the business, but we were growing as a out-and-out supplier of equipment. So we were supplying the pieces of kit that stopped the explosions. Very low voltage stuff. I joined in 1990, so at that time there was about 7 or 8 of us running around a little unit in Dunblane at the time. And I just had a wee van. I was brought in as a storeman delivery driver. The story behind that is I played drums for a thrash metal band, and I needed to get this huge drum kit around. And when they needed a driver, I'd said to my dad, "Do you think if I joined, I could use the van at nights, move the drum kit around?" So cards on the table. This was not a career choice. This was purely selfishly about could I get the drums and the PA equipment around.
Well, this is a drummers union meeting because Tom plays the drums a wee
Yeah.
bit, and I play the drums for 40 years.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we're going to need a bigger van if we're putting the band back together.
So yeah, that's a little bit about the company. We bringing you up to date. We've got locations around the UK. We've got a big cable company supply division up in Inverurie, a big base up in Aberdeen, HQs in Stirling, locations in Hull, Runcorn, Yarmouth. We're about to open up in Stockton, and we're probably looking overseas now as well to reinvent ourselves a wee bit in terms of the opportunities that are in the international market.
So, Colin, let me just stop you there.
Yeah.
So, you joined as a driver looking for really a van for your drums.
Yes.
And now you're all over the place. So tell us about the journey, because you also won the EY Entrepreneur of the Year in between.
Yep.
So how did you work your way up, and what was the big kind of breaks that you got? How did you see the opportunities, and how did you make the most of them?
Well, I think like most people, I was about 17, 18 when I joined the company. I didn't really have a clue what I wanted to do. I think like most of us at that age, it's you're really interested in being able to have money in your pocket for the weekend and being able to have fun with your pals. So that was my motivation at that time. I think as I enjoyed I kind of threw myself into the business, and I really enjoyed the driving side of it. I was able to listen to cassettes. I was able to practice drums in my head and things like that. So runs up to Peterhead and Dundee with delivering equipment was an absolute joy. But I really enjoyed interacting with people. So when I was out on the road delivering, quite often than not, I was getting asked by the sales team behind the scenes, could I let so-and-so know that equipment had been dropped off? So naturally I started to go up, and not only was I delivering to the people in the warehouses and the stores, I would actually make contact with the people, the contracts, the purchasing officers, these kind of people, and I'd say to them, look, that's your kit arrived, that's it arrived now, that's it dropped off wherever. And I started to build up a rapport, and I enjoyed the interaction with individuals, to the point where rather than them ringing the salespeople, when I was in dropping stuff off, they'd say, look, oh, while you're here, here's an inquiry for you. Can you turn that around? I would ask for it. So I was building up relationships. So I kind of started towards sales and then and expediting, chasing up the orders. So when I was doing the driving during the day, at night I'd come home, book all the stuff in, and then handle any inquiries. And I eventually got to the stage where I went out on the road, having handled a you know, like a sales desk, inquiry desk for a while. Moving it on a bit, I went out on the road as a business development chap, knocking doors, trying to break us into new markets, and trying to get to know people so that they would place the orders, obviously, with us rather than others. One of the breaks I got was one of my colleagues. He was covering the Aberdeen area. His wife had fell pregnant. He wanted to be nearer to his house in Brisbane. I was working the Central Belt. I was 20 odd at this time, so we agreed we'd swap patches. So I went up to Aberdeen, and I was very lucky. I went up there from a Sunday through to a Thursday night, stayed in a wee B&B at Constitution Street up in Aberdeen, and I just embraced everything about Aberdeen.
And this would have been during the boom, eh?
Well, I didn't feel like a boom, but yeah, I think looking back on it, it certainly was great times. And again, still in my early 20s, not a clue what I really wanted to do. I was enjoying selling, just getting out, meeting people, enjoying the social interaction. I mean, when you're doing a business development, when you're getting paid to go meet people, what an absolute joy that is. That's what I love doing. Eventually, it became apparent to me that the way that the company could expand would be to have a base in Aberdeen. I was trying to do everything by ringing back and saying to Stirling, we need this up here, we need that up there. We're a very parochial nation by historical standards. So the need to be in Aberdeen, the need to actually have a warehouse or a place where we could call our own up there became a driver. And by 1995, we'd opened the doors in Aberdeen and we'd won a contract with a major client, actually on Valentine's Day. That was a lovely thing. So I then started to argue that we needed a branch up in Aberdeen. There was people telling me we couldn't do it. One of my biggest rivals sat me down one night and told me he was looking forward to put me out of business, having just taken on a mortgage. If ever I needed an incentive to go out there, and when you're hungry for something, when you've got to do something, and it is, you know, you have to do it. You've got to keep a roof over the head. That's a great motivator. So yeah, 1995, I really went for it in Aberdeen. By 1999, we'd opened up another couple of contracts with some other major clients up there. And that started to set the footfall down in England, down in Hull, and in those days, Yarmouth as well. So it was a really busy period. And I was back at night school at that point, learning about back office systems and accountants and things like that. And by 1997, I'm jumping about here, I'd become a director of the company as well. Really off the back of the tragedy of the Dunlane massacre, if I can be personal. Mum and Dad were my best pals with Rod and Gwen Mayer. Gwen Mayer being the teacher who was shot at the accident. So my dad understandably needed to take a step back from the business, and he asked if myself and another colleague would step forward. And that was really it. It was kind of 1987 when all of that came into being. And that's really where I had the first thoughts about, actually, I'm now a director, and this is getting serious. Is this something I want to do as a career? But then the drums had long gone, and I'd met my now wife. So my priorities were changing. Taking on responsibilities for myself, responsibilities for my family, responsibility for the company, and it changes you. And as we get a bit older, we want to try and protect ourselves and preserve what we've got, maybe a little bit less risk averse, so you start to screw the nut, so to speak. So that was what I did. And yeah, as I say, I was at night school, company's expanding, and by 2003 I became the managing director of the company. At this time we were up and down the UK, rapidly expanding, and enjoying a lot of success.
What was the ownership structure then? Was it all owned by the family or who owned?
My dad, my mum and my dad and my sister were the primary shareholders at that point. I can't remember the exact dates, but when I joined the company in 1990, there were really two significant shareholders in the form of my father and a guy called Charlie Smith. He did 56 years with us. Wow. Great guy. Sadly passed. But as I moved forward, the shareholding became simplified to my mum, my dad, my sister and myself. And it became increasingly apparent as I became MD that my dad's priorities, my dad's one of these traditional business guys, you know, everything he'd ever worked for, had strived for. He put absolutely everything into the company. And the one person he hadn't taken care of was himself. You know, he hadn't put the money into his pension. He hadn't done the right things personally. He put everything into the business, his reputation, his credibility, his house, everything. So understandably, when you've got my dad moving that direction and you've got me now looking to invest in how do we put money into the company, you can see there was the beginning of what I would call two captains, one ship. And in a family dynamic, it becomes quite fractious quite quickly. I'm pleased to say my dad and I, we all talk. It's just at the moment, at that particular moment, you've got long-term gains against what was becoming obvious to my dad was a retirement and a short-term play. So by 2007, it was time for a buyout, and that's what we did. We agreed to buy my mum, my dad and my sister out, which we achieved. And with a new management team, off we went into the future. And at that point, I would say that simplifying the share structure, was that the accelerator? I don't know that it necessarily was, but it certainly gave me focus on these are the key things we have to achieve, because at that point we're looking at everything medium to long term. So we could look for overseas opportunities, we could look for new markets, we'd taken on a lot of debt during the MBO, and historically we had debt. So paying that down, that was one of my first objectives, first 5 years of ownership, get rid of that debt. The next 5 years was all about building growth and building value from there. So that was a key part to the strategy as we move forward. Yeah. And now, you know, on my own journey, bringing us up to where I am today, you know, E&Y awards and all that aside, in 2010, I've taken a step back. 2023, I've appointed what I call an operational board. Guys that have worked with me for many, many years. I've got a great team, trust them implicitly. And that's allowed me to step back more into a strategic role where I'm less hands-on. I'm sure they would argue that's for the better for everybody. But for me, it's allowing me to start to restrike that balance now between family, business and personal. And it's something I think in business, every one of us always strives to get right, and probably looks in the mirror every morning saying, I'm getting it wrong.
So, Colin, what kind of size is the business now? Many people
I was going to ask, you spoke
employing,
toward
say-
accelerator. What was the size when you bought your dad out, and was it today?
So 2007, the company was turning about £22 million, and we were generating profits around about, and EBITDA around about 250 to 300,000. The company now will be knocking the door of 62 to 63 million pounds this year, I would hope. Numbers employed, it's a bit of a difficult one, because the number of people, I started with my purpose, everyone home safe. We've got over 350 people we're responsible for getting home safe. The model we tend to use is a blended of what I would call PAYE and contractors.
Yeah.
It's a model that's worked well in the North Sea for years, and over the years it's been pushed and pulled in different directions by regulation and taxation. But so we've got a number of people who are employed, about 120 who are employed on the books, so to speak, and the rest are all contractors who come and go depending on the workloads that we have. So that's mainly our offshore work guys, but I tend to think of them, because it's been a family roots business, I tend to think of them as my guys, which is probably contrary to what HMRC would want me to say and think, but that's how I think of them. If they're working and representing me out in the field, it's our job to get them home. It's our job to look after them. It's our job to get them home safe, and that's how I feel about them.
So we've been talking this morning, you're the perfect guest. So obviously Grangemouth connection, Sterling. Obviously the big announcements last week about Grangemouth and the 200 million and potentially, do you see any opportunities for you here with maybe the new businesses maybe going to set up around about Grangemouth?
I think, you know, this is where the bleep machine would come in. I think the politics of the thing are outrageous, but, you know, it's a family show and we want to focus on the opportunities here. And I guess from the outside looking in, I think energy, one thing we're all agreed on, there's going to be an energy transition. It's whether or not this happens now or whether it happens in 10, 20 years' time. That's the direction of travel. That is presenting opportunities. We've got fuels, synthetic fuels, which I think could be part of the future. I think will be part of the future. We've got hydrogen that's coming into the mix now. We've got things like synthetic aviation fuels that nobody's doing right now, but Grangemouth's perfectly placed for that with Edinburgh Airport on the doorstep. So yeah, there's no reason why Grangemouth couldn't and shouldn't reinvent itself. I've seen it happen in other sites around the UK. Wilton, down in the Stockton and Middlesbrough area, that reinvented itself. Will it be a flagship, all-encompassing business like its heydays? Probably not. But that doesn't mean to say there's not opportunities and something for us to get excited about. And I think Grangemouth has got a promising future. Political rhetoric aside, it's a question of what are those opportunities going to look like as we go forward. And I think some of that is really important in terms of how I hate to say it, it's how we as business people, at the end of the day, we are the people who are going to make this thing happen. Politics aside, that's where we need to be in terms of positioning Grangemouth. I'm watching people like Mary Macklin's doing a great job there. XLCC announcing a great announcement down in Kilmarnock. Her energies are proof positive. If business people get their energies behind these things, there's no reason why things can't be made to happen on the ground. And I think it does need an engagement with business on the ground. I don't think that Dron and Dickson won't be too far away from that in terms of what happens down in Grangemouth. I'd love to be playing a part in it. And I think, yeah, there's definitely a future there. It just might well be more like a patchwork quilt of opportunities rather than one big homogenous company. That said, if I look at the Scottish Government, they've done things in the past. They didn't like the way that boats were getting built, so they bought a ferry company. They didn't like the way an airport was getting run. They went and bought Prestwick. Didn't like the way the railways were getting run. They nationalised the rail. Who's to say they might not even look at that as an opportunity? Energy is an
Colin, come
important part.
on.
Yeah.
You were doing well up till
Colin,
government know how to run businesses. We're going to fall out now. Oh my
The
God.
pledge 25 million. I don't think they want to take it over.
I guess I'm being a little bit facetious.
But my question is there any opportunities for you?
For us, yeah, I think, without a doubt, it's an established site. It's not going anywhere. The fuel storage is going to be massive there, and LNG is going to be part of the mix. I strongly believe that hydrogen will become part of that. The opportunities for us in carbon capture are less, but yes, wherever there's stuff that needs to be stored, and let's be honest, we can go down everything being electrified, but that is decades away. I'm sorry, it's decades away, and I know that people don't want to hear it, but it is. There isn't the number of engineers and apprenticeships to actually make this stuff quick enough. So that's where we need to be.
I
and I think that's the role we need to
agree, and we need to know that that's a sensible timescale. That is decades away. 30 years transition. I agree. Yeah. So this is all about gaining. What a fantastic story, right? In the short bit of time we've got left, this is all about giving yourself a plug. So tell the listeners, the viewers, how can they get in touch with you if they want to use your services?
Well, we're obviously online under the Dron and Dickson. The website's www.drondickson.com. I'm all over LinkedIn as well, so link in with me, Colin Rowley. I'd love to hear from people. And actually, we've got branches around the UK, so wherever you hear this broadcast, we've got a local branch as well. So thank you.
If I get in touch with your LinkedIn, it'll be offer you a job.
As a backing drummer.
Probably as a fronting drummer.
Go Radio Business Show with Hunter and Haughey. Hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and never miss an episode.
On the board, you can't afford this week. We've got a really good guest, Stephen Halpin, who is the founder of Portfolio XD. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Brilliant. So tell us a wee bit about yourself, a bit about the business, then we'll fire into your question.
Okay. So background in brand marketing, digital, commercialisation, had agencies for many years. You might remember the first one, Curious Orange.
Yes.
Many moons ago. And of late, we've moved into setting up a business called Portfolio XD, which essentially provides fractional part-time leadership, C-suite execs, where we supply them mainly into growing, scaling businesses, generally through referrals from investors, so your private equity businesses, VC companies, banks, and advisory. And it allows companies essentially to hire better than they can afford earlier in the growth cycle than they might have thought possible.
So you're the best guest I could ever have had on here, right? Because I am hopeless at this, right? I have failed miserably when it came over the years when I went to recruit people, senior execs. I've got it wrong so many times, it's unbelievable. But my question to you would be, how would anyone who's any good be available on a part-time basis? How do they not have a big job somewhere?
A lot of them have had big jobs.
So are most of them retirees?
Not retirees, no. I mean, I think we ran a poll, so we've got over 1,500 execs now in the talent pool, mainly across the UK, some nearly 400 now international. And a lot of it's a lifestyle choice. A lot of it is about wanting a bit of flexibility, wanting a bit of variety in what they do. And they've taken a decision that actually running 6 days a week, working all the hours that God sends, is not the way they wanted to work. And I think, you know, the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen a lot of disruption with COVID, and we've seen changes in working patterns. And I think, you know, one of the things that has grown over probably the last 5 to 10 years is the whole gig economy. And what we're now looking at is bringing that into that leadership C-suite level. And when you think of most SMEs, particularly at early stage, the requirement for them to have full-time people in those positions is, in some cases it is, right? But in a lot of cases, they end up filling their weeks with things that are not necessarily focused on what they're supposed to be there to do.
So let me ask you, do you place most of these people, so you say temporary or whatever, short term, do you place them in as non-exec directors? No. Or is it so, do they go in as consultants?
No, they go in as fractional, which is different. So a consultant is generally outside the business. They don't have a leadership role. They don't have people reporting to them within the business. Fractional do. It's not interim because it's ongoing. There's very rarely a time limit put on to a hire, and therefore they come into the business. And you know, you mentioned non-exec. You know, non-exec generally will turn up to the board meeting. They'll maybe have a coffee offline with chief exec or chair of the business. But in terms of impacting the business, being involved in the business day to day, they're not. So that's where the fractional guy comes in. Sleeves are up. They're in the business. They're creating and leading teams, and therefore, I think, has much more of an impact to the companies that they're engaged with.
This is intriguing for me. Because they're actually called fractional, right? So I'm going to bring someone into my business who's coming in at a senior level. I'm trusting him to make big decisions, and he might be part-time.
Yeah.
You know, that sounds a bit scary to me.
It does, and you know, I think in the old world, I think it wouldn't happen. Yeah. But I think what you're seeing is, you know, you're getting the benefit of the consultant in the sense that they're coming with an outside perspective. They're coming with knowledge and experience and expertise that they can bring from other places into your business, but they are part of your business.
Yeah, I think this is invaluable, and I think that you made the point about it probably works. The sweet spot for you is in SMEs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're bringing in someone with, I think it's a great idea. So you're bringing in somebody with a lot of experience that normally you couldn't afford, right? You get that expertise, bringing them in. I think it's a great. I think where I'm saying I'm coming into a mature business, a big business, I'm bringing a guy in that's making a decision about 500 people or 1,000 people. But whereas I think what you're offering, I think would be invaluable, right? You know, to SMEs. So, and to have so many highly qualified guys on your database is great. So what you would imagine what you do is you'd take a look at the company. You look at what their discipline was, what sector they're in. You would, I'm hoping you're not using AI now to search your database to see what guys fit the best, and then you place them in these businesses.
Yep, and you know, as I say, a lot of it's driven. You know, there are certain timelines that drives the requirement. So, you know, companies that are potentially looking for new investment, bringing that expertise in as part of the building of the strategy, creating the robust plans, but also building up the team that's then going in front of the investors becomes important. Post-investment, the investors are looking for that money to be spent properly and spent efficiently. So bringing in, in certain disciplines, that expertise on a fractional basis gives them all the firepower of, the experience and expertise in those disciplines, but without the cost.
Yeah, it's great. How do you get your message out there to SMEs that this service is available? Coming on here.
Well, obviously it helps. We took a very focused go-to-market strategy, and that's in the kind of pre-seed funded businesses through to probably the biggest, Series C that we're involved in at the moment, because that allows me to use good old-fashioned business development to target those investors, the banks that have the relationships with those companies. So I come and speak to you, and you've got a portfolio of 120 companies.
Yeah.
I'm hitting 120 companies through that one conversation. So that's what we've done and we've only been on the go since, late 23. Last year, saw a scaling that I didn't imagine would have happened. And as I say, all of that has come through just creating relationships with organizations like that. And what seems to happen is that once we make that first hire in through those organizations, because ultimately all they're doing is referring us to the leadership teams of the businesses. But once they see the quality of the people, the speed with which things happen, and the ease of the whole process, the floodgates open. So,
Well, I don't need to tell you, you'll know that word of mouth and testimonials are the best way to build any business. And I think obviously in that short period of time that you've been doing this, that you've obviously built up, a good reputation. So what's your question for the board you can't afford?
So quite often founders of ambitious businesses know that they need that senior leadership, but it's difficult to get those right hires. Difficult because it takes a lot of time. It costs, both in terms of the recruitment process and then the salaries, and it's risky. And as a result, they often stall or push it back. What would be really interesting would be to understand, probably more at an earlier stage in your business, do you recognise, or can you think of a point where you knew you needed that C-suite leadership expertise, but stalled as a result of those things that I've just mentioned? And if so, how did that affect the growth of the business?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I was quite fortunate because way back in the day, in the early years, a lot of people know, I actually had 3 eyes as an investor, and after 10 years of just being in business. But it was a standard VC investment in and out in 5 years.
Yeah.
But what that taught me was that it taught me about how important it was to have the right auditors. So when I was a small business turning over 6 million, I had Ernst & Young as my auditors, right, which is crazy, crazy. But it taught me a kind of PLC discipline. And the point where I didn't have to look outside, I'd got a chairman who represented 3 eyes on the board, who brought me that big time thinking. But if I had not done that and I knew about this back then, it'd have been invaluable. So if bringing somebody in, and the great thing I think, and this is a message to anybody that's listening to think is a good idea, the good thing about bringing somebody talented in who understands is there's no agenda.
Absolutely.
Right, there's no agenda. They're just going to tell you what's the best for your business. Know the best for them, know the best for their pals, whatever it might be. Whereas when you try and get that from within, you get that unconscious bias, right? So I think that if I wasn't fortunate enough back then, and outside of, okay, I've got a big mature business now, but we own smaller businesses outside, and we've actually, for the first time now, been looking at them, right? Been looking at them and saying, this isn't fair. We're not giving this the time, we're not growing it, or whatever it might be. So I think that this is certainly a service I think that's been valuable to SMEs, especially that ones are trying to scale up, as you say, maybe looking for seed for all that kind of stuff. So for me, I would just say that back in the day, if I'd have known that this service was there, I'd have definitely have used it.
And as a wee follow on, with the amount of businesses that are then stalling and not bringing in that level of expertise and that level of leadership, how much do you think it's holding back the general economy?
Oh, 100%,
If we can unlock that and we can start to accelerate these businesses, who knows what it could do?
Well, tell the listeners, the viewers, how they can contact you if they want to use your services.
So we're in the usual places, portfolioxd.com. Get me on LinkedIn. I'm there most days. And yeah, would love to hear.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on, and thanks for your question.
Amazing.
Brilliant, Steve.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Cheers,
You're
Rob.
welcome. So, Tom, another brilliant programme. So, can't wait till next week. No doubt that Mr. Trump and co have generated plenty of things for us to talk about, and hopefully Mr. Starmer will have generated some more good things for us to talk about. To all the viewers and listeners, hope you enjoyed the show, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.
The Go Radio Business Show with Hunter and Haughey. Hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and never miss an episode.